I was able to pull out of that suicidal depression with professional support. And it got me through that life stage. But life is not linear as we believe it to be. It's circular and cyclical. So I went through a stage of expansion where I had my confidence back, and I met the man of my dreams, and we got married, and we moved into a house together, and we had children, and I was just on fire and on a roll. But after my second child, the depression came back. I experienced postpartum depression. Now this time I was able to take what I had learned the first time around, and my depression wasn't quite as intense for a couple reasons. Number one, I had more purpose in my life, and I knew I would never kill myself now that I had children. So that wasn't an option. And I had to show up for my children, so I compartmentalized my depression. I was on when I was the dutiful housewife and the darling in the community and the good mother. But then behind the scenes, I would sit on the couch and experience depression and try to hide it from people. And that time, I didn't really have the bandwidth to go to therapy, but it was really important that I had that foundation. I wanted to try something new. I had done enough self-discovery to know that there was something inside of me. And I was just compelled to get an astrology reading. So this was 1992. There was no internet, and I actually got my reading on a cassette tape. But the astrologer I never met in person, he was in Washington. I gave him the date that I was born, the city and state, and the exact time. And he looked at the way the planets were arranged above my head at the moment I was born and did a 1-hour reading on who I was as an authentic soul. It was like the blueprint of my soul, he called it. And when I received the cassette tape in the mail and put it into my cassette recorder, I vividly remember where I was, sitting on the couch. My kids were napping, and I listened to him and sobbed. I sobbed because he saw me on a deeper level than my psychologist even saw me. He saw my soul and who I was, and I had never even met him, and it took him 1 hour. That blew my mind, and it validated these feelings and emotions and ways of being that were inside of me that I couldn't express because they didn't align with what another person thought was appropriate, or it didn't align with the culture or the media, and it was confusing. It was like I knew it. Things that maybe I had, characteristics I had about myself that were squashed and suppressed and shamed, he put them in positive light. This is a characteristic you have, and this is how you can put it to good use. So it was a 1-hour tool that enlivened me because I felt validated. And that gave me a support platform to go, yes, what I am feeling is not crazy. I'm not being selfish. I'm not being weird. This is real, and I am going to get to know it, connect with it, and express it. All these qualities that I had, my soul, my invisible essence, what I love to do, what my gifts are. It was a clue, and it was a starting point, and it gave me some meat to work on. And our soul is an enlivening force. Our soul is that invisible essence that is connected to the spiritual realm and to the spirit that runs through all things. So the soul is highly connective, and because it's invisible and connected to source, it's a high vibration energy, and it can heal what ails our human nature on planet Earth, because we are spiritual beings that are eternal, who vibrate at love frequency. And we come down, we tear off from source and come down to have a temporary human experience. And this temporary human experience is all about form and emotion and creativity, and it's a denser vibration. So again, all is good. We need to balance our inner essence and our human nature. But collectively as a culture, we overemphasize the value of everything tangible and productivity and accomplishing degrees and awards and money and fame and houses and fancy cars. That's not that those things are bad, but when they get out of balance, it's heavy and it's draining and it constricts us. And when we're following rules and ways to behave, it's constrictive because we're in this box, these rules. The soul is this higher vibration energy. It's really light. It just wants to move. I call it authentic wildness because it's the childlike self. It's playful. It's curious. It's spontaneous. It wants to move. And it's very creative. So a lot of us forget who we are as children. And that's what happened to me. I was that childlike, joyful person that loved to connect to nature and talk to animals and play. So sometimes when we're depressed, if we can connect to our childhood and who we are as children, that's a clue to our soul and what will enliven us and make us happy. So I went through the postpartum depression, and I started to connect with spirituality through astrology and to understand who I was authentically on the inside. And that was an enlivening force that lifted me out of that funk, gave me something to work on. It gave me validation. And then jump ahead. Remember, life is circular and cyclical. I had a third major depression when life got so big and the kids were a little bit older and we moved to a bigger house, because even though I knew that overemphasizing the material parts of me was exhausting and draining, old habits die hard. And, sometimes you're doing really well in one area of your life, but we constantly have to shape and do our inner work and reflect and review and shed. But it's just about peeling back the layers of the onion. The lesson might recur, but it's not quite as dramatic or intense if we keep working on it. So the third time, we moved into a bigger house, and I was so exhausted, literally couldn't even unpack the boxes. My husband traveled a lot for work, and actually my kids were young. They were 1 and 3. We moved into a house that was double the size. I wasn't very skilled at moving at that point in my life, and so none of the boxes were labeled. I did get help with movers, but my husband was traveling for business, and then we ended up with a sea of boxes in this giant house that was empty. So there I was on the first night in this big home with our voices echoing off the wall, and my children were scared. Daddy wasn't there. They didn't know why we were in this home. They were hungry. I didn't have food. It was dark out, and I didn't even know which box had the baby wipes and the diapers. I was so exhausted just from life and the move and not feeling oriented or grounded in my home, worried for my children. And I just remember we all slept on the floor in the entryway together. And when I woke up in the morning, the sea of boxes was just overwhelming. I didn't even know where to begin. I didn't even know what was in the boxes because they weren't labeled. So I just left them there. And I did the best I could for my children, giving them the basics and carrying on with life. But the boxes just stared me in the face. And I was such a control freak, I didn't want anyone to help me because I wanted to know where everything was and where to put it. But I didn't have the energy to do it. And when I had a moment to myself, it's just catatonic. It just seemed too overwhelming. One day, my mother said, I've done a lot of research on depression, and sometimes people suffer from chemical imbalances, and I've heard that acupuncture can help, and I'd really like you to go to acupuncture. I will help you with the kids. I will babysit. Please go. I've done the research and here is a doctor. So I went, and I learned a whole nother layer about myself and depression. The acupuncturist told me that our bodies are like ecosystems that mirror the nature around us environment. And things move, so blood is like rivers and breath is like wind. And when our system is functioning properly and things move and flow, the body knows what to do and how to heal us and restore balance. But because we're overexerting our mental energy and we're thinking and we're constricting and we're fitting in and we're working so hard and we're overexerting, we end up with imbalances in our body and blockages that block the flow. Even thought processes or anger or emotion or trauma can be blocked in our body and block the natural flow so that things can move. Acupuncture will take a needle and open up those blockages so things start to flow and you can rebalance the energy system. Well, that was amazing to me because it was something that I could take charge of, that was in my power to do, to go and let my body become an aid in my healing. And I was fascinated to learn about the ecosystem in my body, but also he was talking about masculine and feminine energy. And I was very connected with my masculine energy. And this applies to men and women. We all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us. And he was saying, due to the cultural and the conditioning, that I was taught to overwork. Do, produce. But that's exhausting because you're always putting out energy. And he wanted me to be more relaxed sometimes and open to receive, to rest, replenish. Well, that was really hard for me to do back then because it seemed like I was lazy and there were things to do. And it would be the worst thing, the biggest sin for me to come across as lazy, because that's not how I was taught. So I really had to think about that and work on this idea of masculine and feminine energy and how to go back and forth between the two. Exert my energy, replenish. Exert, replenish. And that was the beginning of a really important lesson that I have built on for the rest of my life, is understanding feminine nature and feminine energy. So that's for another video. But the point is, I've learned a lot about myself through depression, and I'm glad I did. It's given me self-empowerment. It's given me an opportunity to go inward and get to know who I am authentically on the inside. And it has informed my life and helped me evolve. And I've created a lot of wisdom that I can share with people about my experiences. So looking back on the depression, it was a good thing for me because it was the catalyst that caused me to go inward, learn who I am authentically on the inside, and express it. But it didn't happen overnight. It was a process. It was a lifestyle of peeling back the layers of the onion of my exterior facade to get closer and closer and closer and more intimate with who I am authentically on the inside. Thank you for watching today. My goal in life is to create deep connections and help people restore balance. I do that by helping you realize authentic wildness in a civilized world. That speaks to both authentic wildness, our soul, our authentic self, and civilization, our human self. Both are valuable. How do we do both at once? I hope to see you next time.